welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for this special LinkedIn event in the evening. I'm really proud and happy to have Drew Gattuso here tonight. Drew and I met many, many months ago at a networking event, and he recently, in the last few weeks, landed, and we're so really excited about that. I think I wanted to bring him back tonight to share a little bit of his story and to talk to people about the questions that they have. So as you get going on the chat, if you want to post, who you are, where you're coming in from, that would be great. But I'll start out by Drew. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory, how you got there, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for inviting me to join you tonight, Ken. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I met Ken a few months ago in a number in some of the networking events that have been in a lot of his meetings. But my story kind of started back in December when I received a phone call advising me that my job was being eliminated because of the pandemic. So on December 14th, I received a phone call, and then as of January 4th, my job was eliminated. And I very quickly I was given the opportunity to take advantage of an outplacement service as part of my severance package, and I jumped on that right away. Utilized the outplacement service, utilized my coach, and since it was free, I took advantage of everything they had to offer. But I didn't know anything about any networking groups. I knew I needed to be on LinkedIn and have a presence there, which I had a minor presence.
Okay.
But I really didn't know anything about networking groups until I met someone who said, "Hey, do you know Alex Freund, the landing expert?" And I said, "No, never heard of the guy." And he gave me the link, and I checked out his website, and had the list of all those local networking groups, and I just started to attend and meet people and kind of started to weave my way through the those groups.
How long were you out? I think you said 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, I received my offer on August 1st, so it was almost 8 months to the day.
And when you started doing this, you had the outplacement. What were some of the things that you did right off the bat? You said you went to some of the outsourcing help that you had. Did you find anything else helpful, or things that you would, in retrospect, maybe not have done when you did them?
I think what was really helpful was speaking to a coach, getting a coach, because I really needed some guidance. I had mentioned to you earlier, with my previous job, I was with them for 10 years, and with my company before that for 10 years. And I had not proactively looked for a job since 2001. So I needed some help and some guidance as to what do I do. I had a resume kind of in place that really needed a lot of work. I just needed some guidance on what to do. How do I start, and how do I jump into the new year and not waste any time? And having the coach there to kind of give me the guidance and to push me, and have someone that I was accountable to, really helped.
So how did the job search change in the last 20 years or so? I mean, from the last time you had it, way back when you had to apply for jobs, what did you notice changed, for the most part?
Well, in 2001, I would get the Sunday Star Ledger, sit down, have some coffee, and go through the want ads and those big placement ads and Sunday, cut those out, and then go to my typewriter and type up my letter, and then drop my letter and my resume into the mail. Fast forward 20 years, obviously, and it's a whole new world, right? With everything online and doing the searches online, and having to try to network. So it was a completely different world, and I really needed some guidance on how to navigate that.
So I would love it if people have questions and they like to post questions in the chat to speak to Drew. I think from what you told me, the position that you have now was a position you ended up getting indirectly. It wasn't the actual position that you applied to. So if you could share a little bit how that happened, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So, as everyone says in terms of what you should do, I networked and I went through everyone I knew that I already was connected with in LinkedIn, all my old contacts, old people I worked with. And there was a company that I was a client of 15 years ago. I had stayed in contact with the owner as well as a few other folks. And I happened to see that they had posted a couple of jobs on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a job I kind of knew I wasn't right for, but I was like, you know what the heck, right? I shot the CEO who I knew an email. Said, hey, Maureen, I see you have this position. I'd love to talk to you about it and see what you're looking for. And I shot her a copy of my resume, and she got back to me after about a week or so. I said, hey, you're not right for that position, but by looking at what your background really is, I really think you can help us. There's a position, VP of sourcing,
Mm-hmm.
that I was thinking about creating next year. I want to talk to you about that now. So it turned out that they created a position for me based on what my background was, and it was all because I reached out, I networked
Mm-hmm.
with her and proactively said, hey, can I be of help?
Definitely. So Joey has a question here. How did you manage the uncertainty of when your next job was going to present itself? I mean, we all have these ups and downs. So I'm sure you had your good days, great days, things went well, things didn't go well. So what were some of the things that you could share about that?
Sure. It was, and if you ask my wife and my kids, they would probably tell you I had some really good days and some days and weeks that were pretty crappy.
Mm-hmm.
And from everyone I've spoken to who's gone through this process, everyone's kind of like that, right? So it was what kind of got me through some of the days where you were just feeling like, man, nothing's going to happen and it's not working. It was just really participating in the networking groups,
Mm-hmm.
because you're with folks who are kind of in that same situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's led by folks who are really trying to help, and the speakers that each of these networking groups bring in really do something to kind of help you, right? So it was really just that, and for me, I needed to be. I'm very process oriented and very kind of almost rigid sometimes, but I needed to keep a schedule. So I got up every day the same time. I came down to my desk 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning, and I had a list of things to do for myself to get through. The number of people I was gonna contact, the number of events I was gonna sit on, whatever it might be. But that kind of kept me going, especially when it was 2 or 3 months where there was nothing happening. There was no responses, nothing, and then it started to pick up. So it was just really taking advantage of the groups. I think really helped me a lot.
You bring up a good point. There are going to be times, and it's happened all this, when nothing goes on. You're waiting and waiting and waiting, and nothing happens, and all of a sudden it just happens out of nowhere. Did you do follow-ups during that time, or did you just kind of do something, a different job search task instead? Or
I did. It's funny because I went within 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. I went through all of my contacts, right? So I had that list of who I was calling and reaching out to folks I hadn't spoken to in 10 or 12 years. And it was kind of that initial, well, should I really call them? I haven't talked to these guys. And I was pleasantly surprised at the reception I received from people who overwhelmingly wanted to help me. And then you kind of went through everyone, made that first pass through folks. And then I was like, well, do I go back and talk to them again? And I felt a little awkward doing that. And then I did it. I forced myself to call and just say, hey, here's where I am. Here's kind of my status. Here's what I'm looking for. Here are the types of companies I've spoken to. And if you know of anything or hear of anything. And so I just had to push myself to keep doing those kind of things, because a lot of times I was like, crap, man, I I feel like I'm being a pest or bugging folks, but in reality, everyone was really went out of their way to talk and to give advice. Um, and every single, I will tell you, every person I spoke to, whether they were an acquaintance, someone I worked closely with, or folks who were coaches, every single one of them ended the conversation with me with how else can I help you? Let me know. Which was overwhelming to me, and especially in the very beginning, because I didn't expect that.
I think it's so great because you're coming back and paying it forward too in a way that I totally appreciate. So I'm going to post a question here, and I don't know if that this is Chemist Soul. I believe she's coming from Canada. What did you do during the waiting period? Did you upskill, or were you just job searching? Which kind of goes along. Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I took advantage of LinkedIn, all the trainings that they have on LinkedIn. So I had I forget what's the package that you have where you have access to everything. But I went in and when you go into the learning section, I think it's called on LinkedIn, you can go in and set some goals for yourself in terms of how many hours a week you want to spend going through some learnings. And I did that. So I would set like, a 3-hour goal each week. And I would go in and look at topics that I thought would help me from an interviewing perspective, just brushing up on some skills, some leadership skills. So I tried to keep myself kind of sharp too. So that's really kind of what I was doing in between the searching and the networking.
Would you put that on your resume, or did you put that you were doing that on your LinkedIn profile too, or is it just kind of for your?
I did. It's on my LinkedIn profile, so you can get your certificate. So it was there, and I did that. And the other thing I did too, I really tried to create a presence for myself on LinkedIn. So I tried to present myself as an expert in my field, and I would, I was very active in groups and commenting and postings, putting out articles. Again, just to try to be top of mind as folks were going into their LinkedIn. And I tried to kind of create that presence.
So Nancy Aronson, again, you never know when an opportunity is going to come your way. I had one interview with 2 people from my current position, was working there a week later. Now she got it through ZipRecruiter, even though other jobs come through networking. And I think that brings up the point that you really have to look at all different sources for when you do the apply for jobs. Even if it's on ZipRecruiter, you may not just apply, but you may find the company and then do some networking through LinkedIn, for sure. So I ask you that this is the question I get again and again about the open to work on LinkedIn. And I don't know if you had it or not on there, but let me ask, did you have open to work on your profile, that banner?
I can tell you, I had it on, I had it off, I had it on, and seemed like every 3rd or 4th day I was switching it. I don't know if it worked, if it didn't work. I don't know, because it was funny because within the different networking groups, the topic would come up often, and depending on who the speaker was, they had a thought or a take on it. So I put it on, I put it off. It was right. It kind of alternated.
So the position, how did they actually contact you about this position? Was it through LinkedIn or what?
No, I saw, I was following the company on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I saw that they had these positions. And instead of applying online, I reached out to the CEO because I knew her.
Okay.
It took, probably took her about 2 weeks before she replied back to me. So in the meantime, I found who not the hiring manager, but I found the HR manager who was handling the position I was interested in initially. I reached out to her and sent her a note via LinkedIn, introducing myself and letting her know that I'm trying to speak with the CEO, but I thought I'd reach out to her. and she kind of helped me
Mm-hmm.
get the conversation going because she knew the CEO was busy.
Now,
No,
I was going to say now. So when you started, so I'm just going to put a couple of comments up here. Sal, keep the tool sharp. He uses Skill Up America, and also there's the LinkedIn, learning and development. When you started your search, did you have in mind any specific companies or industries or something to help you with that, or was just like, I'm not really sure, and it took some time to figure out what you wanted to do?
yeah, it probably took me a good 3 or 4 weeks
Mm-hmm.
to figure out what I wanted to do next.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of split it. I came down to kind of two areas, completely different areas. And I had some target companies, but I found that very difficult for
Mm-hmm.
some reason. But I really was looking at, so the company I landed with is called First, and it's a global events agency, and I'm heading up the sourcing group. I was initially looking at franchising organizations because I've spent the last 20 years in franchise organizations. So that's where I thought I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity that presented itself with First actually has given me more in terms of what I thought I wanted, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does. I think one of the things I find with a lot of people that are in transitions, you learn about yourself and you learn about your skills kind of going through the process. And, you realize that you have an opportunity to maybe try something different, but putting your other softer skills, to use. And what I wonder about also is, did you feel any sense of age discrimination or anything that you really didn't feel comfortable about? Because we all talk about it, but I'd just be curious to know from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, it may have happened, and with things that I've applied to or reached out for, it didn't happen to me to my face where I said, oh gosh, I had an interview and there was really some kind of discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
What really kind of happened was, I think, more in my head, where I think I mentioned to you when I first got the word that I was losing my job. First thing I did was I went up and shaved and got rid of my gray beard and took a new headshot to put on LinkedIn because I didn't want to look
Mm-hmm.
as old as I am or older. And then as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do and speaking with the coach, and I realized if a company didn't want me because I have a gray beard, then I probably don't want to be there because the atmosphere and the culture probably wouldn't be what I wanted anyway. So accept me as I am, the way I look, and if you can't take that, then that's fine too. But no.
Okay, technical difficulty. Okay, so while we're waiting for Drew to get back, I think it's extremely important to realize that you are who you are, and in Drew's case especially, he was able to get the position through networking and through all the tools that he had here. I think the most important thing to realize is that there's all different tools that you can use. It's not just a networking group. It's not just LinkedIn. So while we wait for Drew to come back, love to see if anyone has any specific questions. And while I'm doing that, I'll just I'll check out some shout outs from people here from the very beginning. We have Sal coming in from New Jersey. I see Ken Masola, you're from Ontario. Okay, we're going to bring Drew back. And this is actually the whole thing with doing this, just all the stuff that happens here. So what I want to do, of course, is give a shout out to Adam Lang, who's my son. He's actually logging in from Boston. So as LinkedIn becomes more and more popular, how do you make your profile stand out? And that's a really good question, Adam.
That's a great question. For me, it was I was doing a lot of posting. I was doing a lot of articles.
Mm-hmm.
now articles aren't as prominent anymore because you're able to do more within the post. But I think the articles helped, and it was really tagging, a lot of key folks are having the hashtags, and it kind of kept me kind of top of mind with folks.
Did you find it hard the first time you actually posted or did some engagement? Because we talk a lot about, imposter syndrome or fear of putting something out there and then being judged for it. Was that something that you came across how to deal with?
Yeah, I think I think it was actually from one of the meetings I was in with you, and I think the recommendation was, if you're an expert at something or you know something, create an article, write something, do something. And I sat down and I had 3 or 4 ideas and wrote articles on those items, and put them out there. And as I did it, I'm like, well, do I really know what I'm talking about? Even though I've done it for the last 30 years. But I did it. And you kind of have those thoughts and you put it out there. And the other thing I did was I put on my calendar, I think it was for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday every week. I made sure that I posted,
Mm-hmm.
so that I was active out there, and that I was not only posting, but I was replying to other people's posts, not just with likes, but with meaningful comments.
And Sal brings up the point, write it as though you were seeing it for the very first time yourself. I always say, when you do a profile, write it in the way that you want to be noticed. How can you put yourself in a profile so you come across in the best way possible for the person who's going to hire you? Your past experience is your past experience. It's really more about what can that past experience lend itself to. And this is a question for you, Drew. During your search, did you come across situations where you were told the interviewer liked your resume, but you didn't have specific industry experience, so you weren't considered?
That's a great question. I did not get that, but I've spent the last 10 years in hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
10 years before that, I was in financial services. Now I'm in the event industry. I don't know anything about the event industry. So I was actually fearful in approaching them, because I was like, well, I don't have an event background. I don't know how an event agency works, but I do know sourcing and I do know procurement.
Mm-hmm.
Those skills transfer across industry. And as I spoke with the CEO and then the president of the company, I made it very clear that I would be coming into a new industry and I had to learn that. So I was actually, me in my own head, being nervous about it versus them saying, you don't have what we need. They saw that my skills were transferable,
Mm-hmm.
and that learning the business is something you could do.
I think also the fact that you can share the skills from one industry to the other and mention how they're relevant makes a big difference. I think, with some exceptions, most industries you can transfer the skills, and I think most places hopefully understand that. But if they don't, it's their loss. It's easier said than done. But if they're not going to accept that, I don't know that you'd want to work for the company.
Yeah, I'll tell you, when I had my resume, and my resume wasn't doing it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually worked with Lisa Rangel,
Right.
and her group, to help me with redoing the resume and making it really kind of stand out, and to really take my skills and not and make sure they were broad enough that would go across industries. And I, kind of back to one of your questions earlier, Ken, when you said what kind of helped me, going through the resume process with a third party was extremely helpful, because the process they put me through, to think about everything that I did and having to write it out was a little bit painful to do it, but it was extremely helpful to get the resume where I wanted it. But it also helped me in preparing for interviews because it made me sit and think about what I did, where I was successful, and how I could have those par stories
So
available, right?
what's par? I know what par is, but what is par? Just to let people know.
So now you're going to make me remember the acronym. It's a problem, action, and result, right? So
Okay.
it's being able to either if in an interview someone comes up asks you, have you ever done this, or give me an example of how you overcame this type of issue. You've got things in your back pocket of stories and examples from your history, and sitting and doing that exercise for the resume forced me to think about those things and write it down, and I had it there. So it was a painful 2 weeks to kind of get through that process, but if you can do it and you can afford to pay someone to help you, I would definitely say it's well worth the money. And not necessarily a plug for Lisa, but her
Right.
group was very good at helping what I did.
So were there any questions that threw you, or things that you didn't expect, interview questions? Because we all know the basic questions.
Right.
Like, tell me about yourself and all that. But was there anything that you were kind of caught off guard by?
Well, I'll with the position that I
And even it can be any position, anything you've been interviewing for. I mean, you were out for 8 months. I'm sure you had other interviews too.
Yeah, I did. There was one that was the weirdest that I've ever had in my life. It was for a physician who was a plastic surgeon, and he had these procedures that he had patented, and he was teaching other doctors how to perform these procedures. And he just asked the oddest questions of me, and he had some new procedures that were pretty weird, and asked me if I didn't mind looking at at his website that was fairly graphic.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wasn't prepared. Good thing I had a mask on.
Right.
I think I turned beet red, and my jaw kind of dropped, but that was kind of the weirdest interview I had. But other than that, I think I was fairly prepared for all of the questions that I had received. Not that I did well on all of them. I stumbled, but I was prepared. One trick that I did do, because almost all my interviews, except for one, were virtual.
Mm-hmm.
So I had things up I had two screens, so I had some things up on the screen to kind of refer to. But the other thing I did was I took my phone and I recorded the audio, so that I was able to go back after the interview to listen to what I did. And because you kind of think you did well, but then you listen back, you're like, oh boy, I really didn't do so well. Or you think you screwed something up, and you listen to it and you're like, okay, I didn't really screw that up too bad. So it gave me a chance to listen to my answers and practice those answers even for next time if I felt I didn't answer properly.
So what were when someone asked at the end of the interview, do you have any other questions or something like that? What were some of the things that you responded back to? Because you always have to have something in your back pocket to be able to respond back.
Yeah. I mean, I always had a list of questions that I knew I wanted to get through.
Right.
And typically I would have 10 or 15 questions, and I knew I never got through all of those. I always had some for the end. But always the last thing that I would say to them is, look, hey, I am very interested, even more so now after we've spoken. I'm even more interested in the position. I know I can help you and the company. When can I expect to hear back from you? What's your time frame? Is it a week, 2 weeks? So I know not to anticipate it being in 2 days. And then I would let them know I was going to follow up with them.
I think And you brought up a good thing again. Recording your voice and what you said, how you said it, is a great idea. I know a lot of times. What I also would recommend is when you have an interview, have a mock interview with someone in your networking group and let them ask the questions and respond back, and just do that, because nothing beats the practice.
Yeah.
And having someone really giving you some valuable feedback. So I think.
Yeah. And I was able to do that with my coach. So he
Mhm.
was very helpful with that. And the other thing, especially with everything being, again, virtual, and whether it's, Zoom or whatever tool they're using, I made sure I was prepped, right? I made sure I looked okay, that the I had the login, that everything worked, that, and one of the things I always did was, and I think, again, I learned this from one of our networking calls. The first thing I said to someone when I first got on the call was, "Hey, just in case my internet drops or there's an issue, I'll give you a call back. Is
Yeah,
there a number to call you at?" Because inevitably during the course of the day, your internet's fine except when you really need it, right?
right, definitely.
Uh, so I always prepared. I made sure, and what I did was that my daughter was upstairs
Hmm.
for the very first one, and I made sure that I had the lighting right, my microphones, I sounded okay, and so I logged in with her, and she's like, "No, Dad, you need to do this. Turn the camera this way." And so I made sure, I was prepared that way also.
Definitely. So Grant has the question: how often did you follow up? As a matter of course. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I was always afraid of being a pain in the neck at first, but then I was like, you know what? You have to be.
Hmm.
So if they said it was going to be a week, on that seventh day or so, I would shoot a note, and I would keep. I would. I wasn't to the point where they were they were gonna delete my emails, but I would follow up pretty consistently, because what I found is, um, these recruiters are overwhelmed. And I'll give you a great example with the company that I ended up landing with. Um, the After I spoke to the CEO, she's like, "Okay, I want you to speak with this person, this person, this person, and start learning about what we're trying to do here." And I had some time with the recruiter, and she had said, "Okay, I'll get back to you tomorrow. We'll set up some time." A day or two goes by. I hadn't heard anything. Third day goes by. I was like, "All right," shot her a note. Said, "Hey, Elizabeth, just wanted to follow up. What's good for you?" I didn't hear back. Another day or two goes by, and I said, "One more follow up." I said, "Let me try." And she's like, "Oh my God." And this was, I said, "Thank you for following up." She goes, "I sent you an invitation, but I sent the invitation, but I didn't include you on the invite." And the invitation was for 15 minutes from when I sent it, when I followed up. So I literally ran upstairs, put a shirt on, came down, and jumped on a call with her, not knowing we were going to do it 15 minutes ago. So it was just, you know what? If you think you need to follow up, I say follow up politely, and
Mhm.
because hey, you said you'd have something for me at this time. Are you good? Where are we? Can you give me an update? But yeah, I would follow up. I wouldn't hesitate at this point.
So Don asked the question: how did you approach getting emails or phone numbers from follow up for a company that you're applying to? So you have an interview and you want to follow up. Once upon a time, we might swap out business cards or something like that. But um, would you? How Um, would you ask for their email address? Would you ask for a way to follow up?
Yeah. So especially if I've got the interview with someone, that was always one of the last things I asked for. Also, if I didn't have it
Hmm.
as part of the invitation for the meeting, I would ask for that, or I would follow up with the recruiter and
Hmm.
ask for their email of the person I spoke with, because I want to send one. You want to send a thank you note, right? You have to send a thank you. I don't care
Hmm.
what anybody says. You have to send a thank you. Um, and then you had you're in to for the follow up. Then at that point,
Did you ever text anyone? Or was it all by emails? And okay, because some people have actually thought about texting. So again, how soon after you leave your present employer, or how, in this case, at what point did you feel comfortable updating your LinkedIn profile? Because one of the things that people that just land, they're almost afraid to put it out there because they're afraid that the job's either not going to last or something's going to happen. So do you have a time frame, or when you actually put it up? Was like after a month or next day, or what was it?
After landing,
Yeah.
after I signed my papers, and I accepted the position, probably a week after that, I put it out there. The other thing that I know people struggle with is after I left, after my previous job ended and I was unemployed, it was, what do you do with your time frame on that position, right?
Right.
Do you say, okay, it's ended, or do you leave it open? And again, what helped me was once I went through the process with Lisa Rangel and her team, their recommendation and what I did was I added another, I guess, position, if you will, that basically said I was, I forget how it read. If it was, not that I'm open for work, but I'm looking for my next opportunity kind of thing. And I forget the exact wording. And it just really kind of showed that my previous job ended as of January. And as of January going forward, I was in transition basically, and that I was looking for my next opportunity.
I know a
But I
lot of
think
people.
people struggle with that.
Yeah, I've also said to some people, if you're in transition, you can create a position. Position can be the job you want on there, and then you can list underneath there things that you're doing now, because you don't lose your job, your background when you lose the one specific job. You still take that with you, and I
Right.
think there's no one right or wrong way to do it, but it's about making sure that whatever you have on your LinkedIn matches your resume, at least in a general way. Which brings me, how far back did your resume go, if you don't mind my asking? I mean, a lot of us have been working 20, 25, 30 years, and I don't know if there was a recommendation that you came across.
So prior to redoing it, I had everything I ever did back to 1987 when I graduated college.
Okay.
And so again, and working with someone who helped me with the resume, I have my last two positions, which really accounted for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
So my last two companies, 10 years each. So that's where I had all the detail. And then I listed just the other positions I had without any detail at all, just that some things there. But initially I had everything out there.
So I'm looking to see if anyone else has any other questions or comments. I think the hardest part of being out of work, besides being out of work, is the ups and downs that you face with. And you can be close to something one moment, the next moment, you just don't know. And we talk a lot about ghosting. And I've talked to enough recruiters who basically say one of the issues is that the company can't decide what they want. They want what we all call that pink unicorn, and those people don't exist. And a lot of recruiters just try to get someone in, and that's nothing you can specifically control. But I give a little bit of leeway to some recruiters because they're doing what they can and they're managing what they can. It doesn't help you sometimes when you're looking for a job, but if you understand what they're going through, it certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I think, again, I got fairly close with the recruiter that helped me with this position that I'm in. And she said, in talking with her peers in different industries, that they were just all overwhelmed with the number of fewer people in their department, right?
Mhm.
Doing a lot more work, trying to source recruits and people. And I think they all hear it and feel it. I think everybody who's in the position of trying to look for a job has, if they haven't been ghosted, they will be ghosted,
Mhm.
right? It's just, I think, the way it is, unfortunately.
So how do you stay positive through the ups and downs?
Well, for me, My family was a great help. My wife, and it was funny. Just prior to the pandemic, we had become empty nesters.
Hmm.
And with the pandemic, my son was at Rutgers when it happened, so he came back home and was at home for a year and a half. My daughter had graduated, or was about to graduate May of 20, and ended up moving back home when that wasn't the plan. So having them here, it kind of helped, kind of keep me going. And what was great was my son sat 7 feet from me in this room for 9 or 10 months while he was doing his schoolwork and I was looking for jobs. So that was kind of cool, and he kind of kept my spirits up, and he actually learned a few things overhearing what I was doing with networking groups. So I think he learned something there that he's putting into action now.
So Don asked the question, should your stories include or be about non-work related items that show your skills? Did you use anything like that? Did you talk about other situations, or was it all specific to the job that you're looking for?
No, I've had some stories that were outside of work, that related more to leadership. I was a coach for 7 or 8 years, and I learned a lot coaching with the guy that I coached with, who was a professional, real coach. I was kind of his helper, his assistant. So there were just some things that I learned there, and that I was able to use as part of my stories, to kind of show more of my skills and my soft skills, as part of what I did.
So Janice, what ghosting means is never hearing back, and it could be weeks, it could be months, it could be forever.
Right.
And it cuts both ways. I mean, there are people, when you get a job, when that will happen for most, there are times you don't reply back to all those recruiters, again, because you don't think about it. And whether it's fair or not, it's the nature of what happens. For sure. I think, when Kemisola asks the question, this is a Marty Ladman, it depends thing. How many pages should an ideal resume have?
Right.
There's no one specific answer. You can go 2 pages, 3 pages. Most recruiters are not going to look at every little thing. I mean, that's the way it is. You want to make sure it's readable. You want to make sure it's in the right typeface, and you want to make sure it presents you in the best light. I mean, I can tell you now, if I see a 3-page resume, it better knock my socks off. But again, it's what's on there. It's the contents. And I'd be curious to know how you feel about that, Drew.
Yeah, I would agree. Mine was 2 pages. But you're right. It's got to be. I tried to look at it from, during the course of my career, I hired a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a lot of resumes come past my desk, and to your point, you look at it, and the first thing you look at is, okay, it's 2 or 3 pages, and if it's 2 or 3 pages of just text and upon text, I'm not going to read it, right? It's got to be fairly succinct, and it's got to show me, results, right? What have you done? What's the word, the highlight? So that's how I tried to approach it. It's got to be. You're right. You got to look at it. It's got to hit the reader.
And I think one thing that I've found talking to people is a lot of times when you go on an interview, the people on the other end have just gotten your resume in like the last 5, 10, 15 minutes. So they're kind of caught off guard.
Yeah.
And they're asking you questions because they don't know you. And fair or not fair, it's just the reality of the situation.
Yep. And I can tell you, when you talk about ghosting, I had the ultimate ghosting happen to me. I had gotten through a long interview process with the company. Probably took 3 months. Got down to the point where I went in for an interview where I thought they were going to offer me a position. I went in, they had me meet with a few more people, and I said, okay, where are we at this point? Or when will you be making a decision? It's kind of been going on. So I'm very interested in what's the timing. I will get back to you within 2 days, the owner told me. 2 days came and went. I followed up, and he called. That was a Monday. He said by Wednesday I would know. Friday, he actually called me from an airport and said, "Hey, we really want you to join us." Started to make me an offer, and I said, "Hey, I've got some questions about this." And he's like, "All right, I'm about to get on a plane. Let's talk on Tuesday." So before I hung up, I said, "What time on Tuesday?" And we scheduled it. An hour before the call on that Tuesday, he couldn't make it. And he said, "Hey, we'll talk in a week." And I tried to nail him down. Never heard from him again. But he called and said, "We want you to join us," and then never followed up. I was like, "Okay, well."
So how do you feel? I mean, how do you take that? Because I know how I've had similar things happen to me. What's your response to that when you first get that news?
I was pissed because I felt like I wasted my time. I wanted to, but I didn't. But I wanted to go out onto Indeed and write a negative comment about him and the company, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you I wrote it, but I didn't press send. So I felt better just writing it. But yeah, it was just, I was angry.
Right, of course.
And upset about it.
So I wanted to end the call, be respectful of your time. I want to thank everyone for joining. And Drew, would you be open to connecting with people on LinkedIn, supporting them?
Most definitely. I mean, if anybody had any questions, if I could be of any help to anyone through this process, I'm happy to help anyone.
So thanks a lot, Drew. I know that you're busy working at a new job. What I would end is what has been the biggest adjustment for you going back to work? Even though you're home, you said you're still home, but what has been the biggest adjustment?
Just being in that mode every day.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it's learning. I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a new industry. I'm learning a new company. So it's just being in that mode from the time I get up to the time I go to bed of trying to, my brain not shutting off. So it's just kind of been that, I think. But it's been fun. Look, I think I said to you before, the last 4 weeks have flown by for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the first 8 months of this year dragged while I was going through that process. So it's great. I'm really pleased with. I made a great decision, and I can't thank you and everyone else that along the way that helped me, even when you didn't realize you were helping. As part of the networking groups, it was just all very useful and beneficial. So I tell everybody, find these networking groups and participate. Even if you're not comfortable speaking, sit there and listen, because you're going to learn something new.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's the 7th time you've heard the topic, you're going to learn something new that you can utilize.
Definitely. And I want to give you back most of your evening so you can decompress and try to relax until you get going tomorrow. Anyone who misses some of this conversation, it's recorded and you can look at it on my profile. Once again, have a great night, everyone, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Ken.